Streaming from Oklahoma's own digital studio, this is Dave Davis with Your Money Matters.
Hello everybody, this is Dave Davis with the News on 6 Digital Studio, and today we're talking about something that I think has been interesting since it was announced beginning of this year, which was the discontinuation of the penny and what that means for the future of our finance system, what that means for prices potentially, and all kinds of other things. So I wanted to bring in here, we have Tom Bennett III. He is the co-founder and CEO of the First Oklahoma Bank in Jenks. And today we're talking about the discontinuation of the penny and what that means, the wide-ranging implications for the U.S. economy. Good morning, Tom. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Dave. How are you this morning? Thanks for having me on.
Oh, I'm doing well. I wanted to first off ask you about your reaction when it was announced earlier this year at the beginning of the Trump administration that the penny would be discontinued. Your initial thoughts?
It's been a long time since penny really bought much. So to be honest with you, I don't think it was unexpected. I've always been kind of an enthusiast coin collector really my entire life. So on one hand, I'm sad to see it go. On the other hand, when was the last time that you could really buy something for a penny? I mean, frankly, it'd probably take a backpack of pennies, which would be extremely heavy, to be able to buy anything that you really want anyway. So, it makes sense. It's come, it's gone. Inflation has continued to move, and that has made the penny worth less and less, and its purchasing power worth less and less. And so, it's about time that it goes.
Yeah, no, the five and dime, I mean, even back in the day, before my time, the five and dime, it wasn't even included in the five and dime. It was the nickel and dime, right? I mean, from a financial institution, tell me what this means for you dealing with pennies, people still trying to use pennies. If this is indeed discontinued, when will this happen and how will it affect you as a financial institution?
Frankly, it's just not being made anymore. So instead of it you're not being able to use it, you can still go add 5 pennies together and go buy something. It's just they're not going to make it anymore. And if you think about it, it's been a couple hundred years that we've had the penny with us. And, it cost a lot of money to be able to make them. So if you're thinking about you and I as taxpayers, for every penny we make, it costs us a little over 3 cents. So, the math doesn't add up as to why do we want to keep as Americans, keep printing these different things. But in terms of it being able to buy stuff, yeah, you can still use it. It'll probably become more and more of a collector's item at the end of the day. And, there will be less incentive for people to go search around on their couch to find some extra money or pennies anymore because you won't find them. But, the practical implication is, whenever you've seen like a price and it says, $3.21, that'll probably round up. You'd like to think that, whenever things are rounding, they'd round back down so you get the benefit. I bet you it probably rounds up now to 325, and that's just the way it's going to work going forward. So practically, you'll have a little bit more inflation whenever they get rid of it. But insofar as having extra, we'll have more room in our pockets, I guess. They won't be as heavy, right?
Right. So, that was my next question, Tom, was about the inflationary concerns. So if we're talking about if it's discontinued, let's say early next year, if it is discontinued, do you expect a temporary inflation bump, prices going up because vendors are rounding up since it's not 1 cent, 2 cent, 3 cent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the short answer is yes, but it's yes relative to what? 1 cent going up probably isn't really that big of a deal. And if you think of the environment that we're in now, you do have inflation through tariffs anyway, and that's a far bigger deal in terms of increasing for consumers' prices than just losing a couple pennies here or there. So, scheme of things, yeah, a little bit. Is it going to be noticeable to anybody? I doubt it.
And I was curious too, as a coin collector, what other countries have done this kind of? Have other countries, let's just say G7, G20 countries, streamlined their currency? What's kind of the precedent for something like this?
Well, we're actually one of the last countries to have a piece of money that is denominated with such a small denomination or a small share of value. Lots of countries have gotten rid of whatever the smallest denomination is, and so us keeping the penny and being one of the last ones to get to not use it anymore. I mean, we're actually behind all of the other industrialized nations. And you got to think about it. You go to some different countries, and whenever you're exchanging money, like in Vietnam, the dong that they've got there, it's like 50,000 to one or something like that. It's a huge number, and so it makes absolutely no sense for them to have any pennies. And that really is kind of inflation over time as it continues to step up. And so, us being a reserve currency, we got the benefit of keeping the smallest one and having it mean something to us longer than any of the other countries. So that's probably a good thing.
I'm also curious too, do you see any long-term downsides to this? We've talked about, not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things and maybe that temporary inflation bump. Is there any scenario where it's like, wow, I wish we hadn't have done that you can think of?
If you go back in time, there was a movie called Office Space, and the characters in
Yep.
there made an enormous amount of money from this little fraction sliver, and that would probably be the penny. And so now, whenever we watch Office Space, we'll be thinking about the nickel as opposed to the penny, right? Uh, but I would tell you that the penny's older brother, the nickel, that one's going to be probably the next one. If you think about it, I think it costs over a dime for the American population to make a nickel. And at some point, you got to scratch your head and you got to go, okay, how much longer are we going to do that? The fact of the matter is, we're going to a more paperless world. You can transact more things with your phone. Less people are carrying cash. And really, in the world of cash, if you think of like a $20 bill or a dollar bill, less people walk around with a bunch of coins in their pocket. It just doesn't work as much anymore. So I would imagine you'll keep seeing more and more of the lower denominations of the currency go away.
Where do you think the end game is? Does it just stop at a dollar eventually and we get rid of all coins? Do you see that happening?
Well, you have to think about it. I used to have a wallet that had a kind of a little coin. I don't want to call it a purse, but a coin kind of place.
Yeah.
My phone doesn't really even have a place for dollars, right? And so, whenever you think about it, but the coins are going to be just kind of a fun thing that you had to remind you of what you had in the past, right? And so as someone who enjoys collecting coins and enjoys seeing old money, it just means that after 2025, that'll be the last penny that you'll have in your collection.
So tangible money, just kind of writ large, that paper currency, the coins, you think maybe eventually we're all going cashless? I mean, is there a timeline for that you could say like, okay, so what would it look like in 20 years, tangible currency, both bills and coins? Let's just say like 20 years out. What do we think that's going
I
to look
wouldn't
like?
I wouldn't be surprised if most of them are gone by then. I mean, you really have to think about inflation. So if our currency is inflating at greater than 3% per year, you got to think of anything that you have in your hand. It gives you less purchasing power, right? And so right now, you could buy a stick of gum or some candy for $1. Well, next year it's going to cost you $1.03, and then it's going to cost you $1.07, and then it's going to keep going up and up and up. Well, at some point, then having a piece of currency that's only worth 5 cents, it's going to take you a ton of change to be able to go and buy anything, and that's assuming that you have it. So most people, I mean, the trend is people are paying with cards. The trend is people are paying less and less with cash, and less with coin. And so it just makes sense that over time this will be kind of, I don't want to say a relic of our past, but that's probably going to be what it is. We don't trade, we don't have a barter economy anymore. People don't come up with chickens to go ahead and exchange for something else. And so, this is kind of just a sign of the times.
And just to be clear, when we talk about inflation, because inflation has become a political tool, campaigning, we're talking about natural inflation over time that has been going on for centuries, how things and prices naturally inflate, right? We're not talking about certain spikes and dips. We're just talking about natural rise over time.
Yes. So the Federal Reserve expects inflation to be about 2% per year. That's kind of their target. Right now, we're running a little hotter than that. But the old saying is back then it was cheaper. Well, the truth is it was. And why? Because everything prices naturally creep. That's part of the system, and that in the scheme of things is a pretty good thing. But it does mean that the dollar that we had 5 years ago doesn't have the same purchasing power as the dollar we have today. And that will continue.
Interesting. Well, the final question here, Tom, you've been very generous with your time. What is the value of the material that the penny is made with? And we can throw in nickel as well, but what are pennies made of? And is it worth the government trying to melt it down for parts, basically, for lack of a better term?
Well, and this is the collector side of me, so this is probably a lot of stuff that people don't care about. But, prior to 1982, the penny was actually copper. It's not all copper anymore. It's over 97% zinc. And it just has like a copper kind of sheathing on the outside. So, if you hear people that are trying to go around and steal copper because of its conductivity,
right?
Well, you wouldn't do it with pennies. You would do it with 1981 pennies. There was only one other time where they used another material instead of copper, and that was back in the 40s. I think it was 1943.
World War II, I would imagine.
Yep. And so there was a steel penny back then, but if the idea of let's just save the materials and we'll use them as a country, well, it would be copper is the thing that you'd really want. And it's been 50 years since all of our pennies, 40 years since all of our pennies were copper anyway. So I don't know. I couldn't tell you all the things we use zinc for, so I'm sure I'm going to get a bunch of emails from my different buddies who were saying zinc is super important and it's of national interest. And I won't disagree because I don't know, but I do know it's not the copper that it used to be anyway.
Well, and it's important to note too, as you mentioned, it's not entirely zinc. I mean, if you're talking about separating the parts, it's 97% zinc, 3% copper. So then what is that cost of that process to, for lack of a better term, separate it out? I mean, at this point, it's not a solid element, so not really kind of in the mix there.
Yeah, I was going to say, we'll go back to school, get some chemistry degrees, and we'll see what we come up with, right?
Yeah, some alchemy. Yeah, well, hey, Tom Bennett III with First Oklahoma Bank in Jenks, thank you so much for taking this time. I've learned a lot with this discussion, and I really appreciate you being here today and teaching us all about finance and literally money, the money that we use. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much. You guys have a good day.
You too. We'll see you next time on the Digital Studio here at News on 6.
Thank you for watching this Oklahoma's own Digital Studio sports presentation. Stay with News on 6 online and on television anytime for the latest news, weather, and sports.